Ambassador Marcus Webb had three things on his mind as he entered the Grand Galactic Council chamber: his lower back pain, the fact that he'd forgotten to buy coffee filters that morning, and whether his phone was on silent. What he should have been thinking about was why the 17 other species representatives were all staring at him like he'd just walked into a surprise party thrown by people who didn't like him very much. The chamber itself was a masterpiece of overcompensation. Floating platforms arranged in concentric circles, each one pulsing with what Marcus could only describe as aggressive mood. Lighting. There were holographic displays everywhere showing absolutely nothing useful. And the acoustics were designed so that every word echoed exactly 3 times, which meant every sentence took 4 times longer than necessary. Ambassador Webb, announced Council Director Vexthara, an amphibious creature whose skin changed colors based on emotions that Marcus hadn't bothered to memorize. Currently, Vexthara was a smug shade of teal. How generous of humanity to finally join our session. We were just discussing the void zones. Marcus nodded, pulling out his phone to check his emails. Void zones. Got it. The 17 regions of space where light ceases to function, Vexthara continued, his voice dripping with the kind of patience you reserve for particularly slow children. Where over 40 expeditions have vanished without trace. Where the very fabric of illumination breaks down and darkness becomes, shall we say, aggressive. Aggressive darkness. Marcus repeated, deleting a spam email about extended warranties. That's definitely a thing that makes sense. A reptilian delegate from the Kathros Empire leaned forward, her scales clicking together nervously. We've lost contact with every probe, every ship, every reconnaissance team. The darkness in these zones doesn't just absorb light. It hunts it. Marcus looked up from his phone. I'm sorry, did you just say the darkness hunts light? Precisely, Vexthara said, his skin shifting to what Marcus guessed was condescending purple. Which is why the Council has decided that a species with, shall we say, less valuable genetic diversity should investigate. We were thinking perhaps the Glickstar, but they went extinct last Tuesday. So we're open to suggestions. This was the moment Marcus should have paid attention. This was the moment he should have recognized the trap. Instead, his phone buzzed with a text from his daughter asking if he'd remembered to feed her goldfish, and he said, "Sure, we'll do it." The chamber went silent. Even the aggressive mood lighting seemed to dim in shock. Excuse me? Vexthara's skin went through 6 colors in rapid succession, landing on something between confused and delighted. Marcus looked up. What? You just volunteered humanity to investigate the void zones. I what? The Kathros delegate actually smiled, which was terrifying because her species had too many teeth. How brave, how noble, how perfectly expendable. Now hold on, Marcus said, standing up so fast his back spasmed. I didn't mean to, my daughter has a goldfish. Too late, Vexthara announced cheerfully. It's been recorded in the Council archives. Humanity accepts the Void Zone assignment. We'll have a ship prepared for you by morning. Congratulations, Ambassador. You're about to become either a hero or a cautionary tale. Probably the latter. Marcus sat back down, his phone forgotten. I really hate this job. We know, said every other species in unison, which was somehow more terrifying than anything about the void zones. The ship they assigned looked like someone had welded a cargo container to a rocket engine and hoped for the best. Stenciled on the side in letters that were definitely meant to be ironic was Prometheus 2. They named our suicide mission after the guy who got his liver eaten every day. Captain Rita Vasquez stood with her arms crossed, staring at the ship with the expression of someone who'd seen too much and was tired of being surprised by human stupidity. Actually, it's named after the first Prometheus, said Engineer Leo Park, adjusting his glasses with the enthusiasm of someone about to explain something no one wanted to know, which exploded in the beta sector 3 years ago. So really, we're the sequel to a disaster movie. That's almost worse. Marcus rubbed his temples. Please tell me this thing at least has working life support. Define working, Leo said. Because technically, intermittent functionality is still a type of working. The 4th member of their crew bounded up with the energy of a golden retriever that had just discovered squirrels existed. Dr. Nino Coy, xenobiologist, and apparently the only person excited about their impending doom, was carrying what appeared to be 17 different scanning devices. This is amazing, she said, her eyes wide. Do you know what we might discover in the void zones? Completely new forms of life that exist without light. We could revolutionize our understanding of biology. We could also die screaming in the dark, Rita said flatly. Yes, but think of the data we'd collect right up until the screaming part. Marcus looked at his crew, a captain who'd seen combat in 3 different wars, and trusted no one, an engineer who explained everything like a TED Talk, and a scientist who treated deadly phenomena like Christmas morning. We're definitely going to die, statistically speaking, Leo said, pulling up a holographic display. 17 species have attempted void zone exploration. That's 43 ships, roughly 862 individuals, and a 0% survival rate. So yes, we're almost certainly going to die. But on the bright side, we'll be the first humans to die there. Which is like being a pioneer. Your optimism is disturbing, Rita said. I'd prefer to think of it as radical acceptance. They spent the next 4 hours loading the Prometheus 2 with supplies. Marcus had authorized an equipment list that made sense right up until Nina added emergency therapy goldfish, and Leo requested something called the compensator, which he refused to explain but insisted was probably legal in most jurisdictions. The ship's cargo bay filled with flashlights. Thousands of flashlights, industrial spotlights, glow sticks, LED strips, bioluminescent algae in jars. An experimental fusion lamp that Leo claimed could make a small sun, but just for a few minutes, and only if we don't mind the radiation. You know what I love about humans? Rita said, organizing her collection of knives with the care of someone arranging family photos. Every other species in the galaxy approaches danger with caution and planning. We approach it with spite and unreasonable amounts of equipment we probably don't know how to use. The Galactic Council thinks we're expendable, Marcus said, watching Leo argue with Nina about whether they needed more glow sticks or more scanning equipment. The Galactic Council thinks everyone's expendable except them, Rita corrected. But they keep sending humans to do their dirty work because we're the only species stupid enough to say yes and stubborn enough to occasionally succeed. Do you think we'll succeed? Rita looked at him with the flat honesty of someone who stopped sugarcoating reality around her 3rd war. I think we'll probably die. But I also think if anyone's going to punch cosmic darkness in the face and somehow survive, it's going to be humans doing it wrong but with enthusiasm. Launch sequence was scheduled for 0600 hours. At 0603, they discovered the navigation system was in a language none of them recognized. At 0605, Leo announced the life support was mostly functional. At 0607, Nina found what she thought was a spider but turned out to be a critical engine component. At 0610, they launched anyway because humanity had long ago decided that prepared was just a suggestion. As the Prometheus 2 cleared Earth's orbit, Marcus looked back at the planet. For the record, I'm only doing this because I accidentally volunteered. We're all only here because someone made a mistake, Leo said cheerfully. That's basically the human condition. The stars ahead looked normal, peaceful even. But their destination was a region where stars didn't shine, where light went to die, and where apparently humans were expected to either solve an ancient mystery or become another statistic. Well, Rita said, checking her weapons for the 3rd time. At least dying in space is more interesting than dying in traffic. Nobody could argue with that logic. The Prometheus 2 accelerated toward the void zone, carrying 4 humans, too much equipment, and the kind of confidence that came from either courage or ignorance. Possibly both. The transition into the void zone wasn't gradual. One moment they were flying through normal space with stars and light and all the things that made the universe feel like a place where physics worked. The next moment, everything went dark. Not dark like nighttime. Not dark like a power outage. Dark like the universe had decided light was a privilege humanity no longer deserved. Okay, Leo said into the absolute blackness, his voice steady despite what Marcus assumed was internal screaming. That's not ideal. Emergency lights should be activating, Rita said. There was a click. Nothing happened. Another click. Still nothing. Emergency lights are apparently on strike. Marcus fumbled for his phone. Muscle memory from every time he'd gotten up at 3 in the morning looking for the bathroom. The screen should have illuminated. It didn't. My phone's dead. How is my phone dead? It was at 93%. Because we're in a region where light doesn't work, Nina said, and she sounded excited, which was deeply concerning. The void zone doesn't just absorb light, it negates the electromagnetic radiation spectrum. We're experiencing existence in the absence of photons. Can you translate that into regular human? Marcus asked. We're in the dark and we're going to stay in the dark, and also we might die. Thank you. That's much clearer. Something moved outside the ship. Not sound exactly, because sound in space was impossible, but the sensors registered movement. Large movement. Very large movement. Please tell me we still have sensors, Marcus said. We have sensors, Leo confirmed. They're just showing us things I wish they weren't showing us. How big are we talking? Remember that time we saw blue whales at the aquarium? Yes. Imagine if the blue whale was the size of a smart car, and the thing outside was the actual blue whale. Rita's voice cut through the darkness, with the kind of calm that came from accepting absurdity. So we're surrounded by space whales that live in the dark. Great. This is fine. Everything is fine. The sensor data painted a picture their eyes couldn't see. Massive bioluminescent signals moving around the ship in patterns that seemed almost coordinated. They weren't attacking. They were circling, the way sharks circle something they're trying to figure out. They're curious, Nina said, her voice filled with wonder. These creatures exist in complete absence of light, which means they've evolved beyond our understanding of biology. They might not even perceive reality the way we do. Fascinating, Marcus said. How do we avoid being perceived to death? Working on it, Leo said. The sound of him typing was oddly comforting in the darkness. Proof that at least keyboards still worked. I'm trying to restore emergency power to at least one external light. If we can create even a small amount of illumination, we might be able to wait. Wait is never a good word, Rita said. The power system is responding, but the energy is being drained the moment it reaches the lights. It's like something's feeding on the electricity before it can convert to photons. Marcus felt the ship shudder. Not violently, but deliberately. Like something large was pressing against the hull with the gentleness of a giant trying not to break a toy. They're touching the ship, Nina whispered. They're trying to understand what we are. Let's maybe not let them understand us too well, Rita said. Another shudder, then another. The creatures were all around them now, their bioluminescent signals creating a constellation of curiosity in the sensor data. Marcus could imagine them in his mind. Vast things that swam through darkness the way fish swam through water. Creatures that had never seen a star and wouldn't understand the concept of light if you explained it. I've got an idea, Leo said. It's a bad idea, but it's an idea. That ideas are still ideas, Marcus said. What have you got? The compensator. The thing you wouldn't explain? It's essentially a light bomb. I built it as a prototype for deep space illumination. It creates a burst of concentrated photons that should, theoretically, overwhelm any light-dampening effects for approximately 30 seconds. Rita spoke slowly. Carefully. You brought a light grenade to a place where light doesn't work. I brought a light grenade to a place where light might need to work really badly at a critical moment. That's the most human thing I've ever heard, Marcus said. Do it, Nina said. If these creatures exist in darkness, a sudden burst of light might harm them. They could be peaceful. They could also be eating us very slowly, Rita pointed out. The ship shuddered again, harder this time. The sensor data showed more signals arriving. Dozens of them. Whatever these things were, they were gathering, and gathering rarely meant anything good. We need to see what we're dealing with, Marcus said. Leo, activate the compensator on my mark. Low power first. Let's not commit genocide on our first contact. Low power genocide. Got it. Marcus took a breath of recycled air in absolute darkness and made the call. Mark. The universe exploded with light. For exactly 4.5 seconds, the void zone wasn't void anymore. The compensator turned the Prometheus 2 into a miniature sun, and what it revealed made everyone on the bridge stop breathing. The creatures were beautiful in a way that defied language. Translucent bodies the size of city blocks, flowing through space like jellyfish made of shadows and starlight. Tentacles that branched into fractals, each one lined with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in sequences that looked almost like writing. They surrounded the ship in a sphere, hovering in the light with what could only be described as shock. Then the light died, and the darkness rushed back like water filling a broken ship. Oh, okay, Nina said quietly. That was amazing. That was terrifying, Marcus corrected. They didn't attack, Leo said, reviewing the sensor data from those 4 seconds. The light hurt them, you could see them recoil, but they didn't lash out. They just moved back. Rita was quiet for a moment. They're not predators. They're guards. What makes you say that? Because I've seen guards before. The way they move, the way they circle, the way they're not aggressive but also not letting us leave. They're not trying to kill us. They're keeping us contained. Keeping us contained from what? Marcus asked. The answer came in the form of more sensor data. Beyond the sphere of creatures, deeper in the void zone, there were structures. Ancient structures, massive and geometric, floating in the darkness like tombstones in a graveyard. Those aren't natural, Leo said, his voice tight. Someone built those. Someone built a city in the dark. Mina pulled up enhanced scans. The architecture is old. Millions of years old. And look at the pattern of the structures. They're arranged in a specific formation. What kind of formation? A cage. The word hung in the darkness like a threat. Marcus felt his brain shift into the kind of overdrive that happened when humans realized they stumbled into something way above their pay grade. So let me get this straight. These shadow creatures are guarding ancient structures that are designed to keep something contained. That's my assessment, Nina said. And the 43 ships that came before us? Leo pulled up long-range sensors. They're here, all of them. Scattered throughout the void zone, intact but powered down. The crews chose to stay. Chose to? Rita asked. The life support systems are still running. They have power. They could leave. But something convinced them to stay in the darkness. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. What could be scary enough to make 17 different species choose to stay in the dark forever? The answer came not from his crew, but from the sensors. The structures at the center of the void zone were moving, not the gentle drift of objects in space, but deliberate, coordinated movement. They were opening. Oh no, Leo said. That's not good. That's the opposite of good. That's bad. Status report, Rita snapped, going full military. The structures are releasing something. Sensor data is inconclusive because it's not reading as matter or energy, it's reading as absence. Like someone cut a hole in reality. The shadow creatures surrounding their ship went into a frenzy. Their bioluminescent patterns flashed in sequences that looked like warnings or alarms or screams. They moved toward the structures, forming a barrier between the opening and the Prometheus too. They're protecting us, Nina realized. They're trying to keep us away from whatever's coming out. Marcus stared at the sensor data, at the hole in reality growing larger, at the ancient cage breaking open, and he felt the weight of a decision no human should have to make. They could run. They could fire up the engines, blast through the circle of shadow creatures, and flee back to normal space where light worked and darkness stayed where it belonged. But running meant leaving the cage open. Running meant whatever had been imprisoned for millions of years would be free. Running meant the galaxy might face something worse than the void zones. I hate this, Marcus said. I really, genuinely hate this, but we need to close that cage. How? Leo asked. We don't have the technology. We don't even understand the technology. No, Marcus agreed, but we have light. And if these creatures guard the darkness, maybe light is the lock. You want to use the compensator at full power, Rita said. It wasn't a question. I want to hit that cage with enough light to weld it shut. Can we do that? Leo was quiet for a moment. Yes, but it'll burn out every system we have, including life support. We'll have maybe 10 minutes to get back to normal space before we suffocate. And if we don't seal it? Then something that scared an ancient civilization badly enough to build a prison in the void zone gets loose, and we probably all die anyway, just slower and with more regret. Nina spoke up. There's another option. We could try to communicate with the shadow creatures. They'd been here for millions of years. They might know how to properly seal the structures. With what? Marcus asked. We don't speak bioluminescent patterns. No, but we speak light and dark. And sometimes that's enough. Marcus looked at his crew. A captain ready to fight cosmic horror with knives and spite. An engineer who built light bombs for situations that shouldn't exist. A scientist who believed communication was possible with creatures that lived in absolute darkness. This was the team humanity had sent into the void zone. This was either the galaxy's best hope or its biggest joke. Okay, Marcus said, new plan. We use the compensator, but not as a weapon, as a language. Leo reprogrammed the compensator, while Rita calculated trajectories and Nina analyzed the shadow creature's bioluminescent patterns for anything resembling syntax. Marcus sat in the captain's chair, watching the sensors track the growing tear in reality at the center of the ancient cage, and thought about coffee. Specifically, he thought about how much he wanted coffee, and how unfair it was that his last thoughts might be about caffeine deprivation. Okay, Leo said. I've modified the compensator to pulse in sequences instead of one continuous burst. We can create patterns. Whether those patterns mean anything to the shadow creatures is anyone's guess. What should we say? Marcus asked. Nina pulled up her analysis. Their patterns suggest a mathematical base structure. Prime numbers appear frequently. I think we start with that. Universal language and all. We're going to speak to cosmic guardians in math, Rita said. Why does this feel very human? Because we're taking something complicated and breaking it down to counting, Marcus said. Let's do it. The Prometheus 2 rotated to face the closest shadow creature. The compensator charged with a whine that seemed too loud in the darkness. Then Leo activated it, and light pulsed into the void in a sequence. 2 flashes, 3 flashes, 5 flashes, 7 flashes. Prime numbers. Hello in mathematics. The shadow creature stopped moving. Its bioluminescent patterns went dark. For a horrible moment, Marcus thought they'd killed it. Then its entire body lit up in a cascade of light patterns, complex sequences that made Nina gasp. They're responding, she said. They're counting. But look at the secondary patterns. That's not math. That's information. The sensor data translated the patterns into something approaching language. Not words, but concepts. Old, protect, seal, fear. They're afraid, Nina whispered. These massive creatures that live in the dark are afraid of what's in that cage. Marcus made a decision. Leo, show them what we brought. Show them our light. The compensator activated at full power. For 30 glorious seconds, the void zone burned with illumination bright enough to see stars through. The ancient structures became visible in their full horror. Twisted architecture that hurt to look at. Geometry that shouldn't exist. Surfaces that seemed to extend into dimensions the human eye couldn't process. And in the center, in the opening cage, something moved. Something that was the opposite of light. The absence of existence. Darkness given form and hunger. It recoiled from the light, retreating deeper into its prison, and Marcus understood. The cage wasn't meant to keep something in, it was meant to keep something asleep. And light was the alarm clock it desperately wanted to avoid. The shadow creatures understood too. Their patterns changed from fear to something that might have been hope. They moved toward the structures, their bodies beginning to glow with an internal light Marcus hadn't seen before. They were choosing to burn, choosing to become the very thing that hurt them, because it was necessary. They're sacrificing themselves, Nina said, tears in her voice. They're using their own bioluminescence to seal the structures. No, Leo said. Not sacrificing. Look at the energy readings. They're not dying, they're transforming. They're becoming light. The shadow creatures surrounded the ancient cage, their bodies brightening until they were no longer creatures of darkness but beings of pure illumination. The structures responded, their surfaces beginning to seal, the hole in reality closing like a wound stitching itself shut, but it wasn't enough. The thing inside pushed back, fighting against its imprisonment, and Marcus saw the shadow creatures beginning to flicker. They need more light, he said. They need us. If we give them the compensator's full power for an extended burst, we'll lose everything, Leo warned. Engines, life support, navigation. We'll be dead in space. Rita was already at the weapons console. Then we'd better make it count. If humanity's going to die lighting up the darkness, we might as well do it properly. Marcus looked at his crew. They were nodding, all of them. Scientists and soldiers and engineers, all agreeing that burning out in a blaze of light was better than letting the darkness win. Humans, he said with a laugh that was half hysteria and half pride. We really are just optimistic idiots, aren't we? The best kind, Nina said. Leo, give them everything. Rita, angle us toward the largest gap in the seal. Nina, keep monitoring those creatures. I want to know if we're helping or making things worse. Charging the compensator to maximum, Leo announced. This is going to hurt. He wasn't wrong. When the compensator activated at full power for a sustained burst, it felt like the ship was being turned inside out. Every light on the Prometheus 2 blazed. Every screen, every panel, every piece of equipment that could produce illumination did so at maximum capacity. The ship became a star, and Marcus felt the heat of it through the deck plates. The shadow creatures took that light and amplified it, focusing it into a beam that cut through the darkness like a sword through silk. The ancient structures screamed, their surfaces sealing shut with force that registered on sensors as localized reality stabilization. The thing inside the cage made one last attempt to break free, tendrils of absolute darkness reaching toward the light. Then the shadow creatures hit it with everything they had. Everything humanity had given them. And the darkness retreated, fell back, and was sealed away as the structures locked with a finality that echoed across dimensions. The compensator died. The ship's lights flickered and went out. Emergency systems whimpered and gave up. The Prometheus 2 floated in the void zone, dark and quiet, mission accomplished and thoroughly destroyed. But around them, the shadow creatures glowed. Not with bioluminescence, but with actual light. They had absorbed the energy humanity had provided, had transformed it, had become something new. Guardians not of darkness, but of the boundary between light and dark. And they remembered the species that had helped them. The species that brought light even when it burned them. The tow back to normal space took 6 hours. The shadow creatures, now glowing with permanent luminescence, guided the dead Prometheus 2 out of the void zone with a gentleness that seemed impossible for beings their size. They deposited the ship just beyond the boundary where light worked again, then retreated back into their patrol patterns, Guardians restored to their post. Marcus sat in the emergency shuttle they'd managed to deploy before life support completely failed, drinking terrible instant coffee and watching Earth grow larger through the viewport. Next to him, his crew looked like they'd been through a war, which technically they had, just not the kind that made sense to explain at parties. The Galactic Council chamber was exactly as pretentious as Marcus remembered, except now Vexthara's skin was cycling through colors so fast it looked like a confused rainbow. "You survived," the council director said, his voice caught between shock and disappointment. "We do that sometimes," Marcus said, dropping a data chip on the council floor. "Here's our report. Short version, the void zones are guarded by shadow creatures that protect the galaxy from something really bad sealed in ancient structures. We helped them reseal a breach." "You're welcome." The reptilian Kathros delegate picked up the data chip with a shaking claw. "You're saying you made contact with the Guardians and formed an alliance?" "We brought light to the darkness and didn't die," Rita said flatly. "By cosmic horror standards, that's basically a marriage proposal." "But the previous expeditions," another delegate stammered. "They stayed. They chose to remain in the darkness. Because they were afraid," Minya explained. "They saw what was in that cage and decided hiding in the dark was safer than risking exposure. Humans don't really do that. We have a pathological need to turn on lights and see what's making noise in the basement." Vexthara's skin settled on a pale yellow that Marcus was pretty sure meant confusion. "You're telling this council that humanity's response to cosmic horror was to illuminate it. More or less," Marcus said. "We also made friends with things that eat darkness, but that's a bonus." "This is unprecedented," Vexthara said. "Humans have succeeded where 17 other species failed. You've established communication with entities we thought were monsters. You've secured a region of space that has claimed hundreds of lives." He paused. Why? Marcus thought about that. He thought about his crew, about the decision they'd made to burn their ship to light the darkness, about the shadow creatures choosing transformation over extinction, about 43 other ships still hiding in the void zone because they were too afraid to act. "Because humans are terrified of the dark," he said finally. "We're so scared of it that we'd rather burn ourselves out bringing light than accept the darkness as inevitable. Every kid with a nightlight, every city that never sleeps, every deep space probe we send out with nuclear batteries that'll run for decades. We're a species that looks at the infinite dark universe and says no thanks. We brought flashlights. That's either very brave or very stupid," the Kathros delegate said. "It's human," Rita corrected. "Which is usually both." The council debated for 3 hours about protocols and procedures, and what humanity's new relationship with the Void Zone Guardians meant for galactic politics. Marcus stopped listening after the first hour and answered emails on his phone, including one from his daughter confirming that yes, the goldfish was fine, and why was Dad on the galactic news again? When the debate finally ended, Vexthara approached Marcus privately. His skin was a color that might have been respect or might have been indigestion. "Ambassador Webb," he said quietly. "The Council has decided to assign humanity as the official liaison to all Void Zone regions. There are 16 more scattered across the galaxy." "Of course there are," Marcus said. "And let me guess, you want us to check on all of them?" "Someone has to. And apparently, humans are the only species foolish enough to bring light to places where light was never meant to exist." Marcus finished his terrible instant coffee and thought about his back pain, his caffeine addiction, And the fact that he was probably going to spend the rest of his career doing the galaxy as most dangerous jobs because humans had a reputation for being too stubborn to know when to quit. Fine, he said. But we're going to need a bigger ship, and better coffee. And hazard pay. Agreed. And someone else can name it. If I see one more ship called Prometheus anything, I'm retiring. Vexthara's skin flickered with what might have been amusement. What would you name it? Marcus thought about shadow creatures that became light about ancient evils, sealed in cages about the way his crew had chosen to burn rather than hide, about humanity's cosmic reputation as the species that brings light even when it hurts. The nightlight, he said. We'll call it the nightlight, because apparently that's what we are now. The galaxy's emergency illumination. 3 weeks later, the nightlight launched with a full crew, better equipment, and premium coffee beans. Marcus stood on the bridge watching the stars, knowing that somewhere in the dark between them, ancient things waited in ancient prisons, guarded by creatures that now glowed with light humanity had given them. The galaxy had learned something important. Humans don't fear the dark because they're brave. They fear the dark so much they refuse to let it win. They'll bring light to the deepest voids, illuminate the oldest horrors, and turn on every lamp, flashlight, and improvised photon emitter they can build, because the dark fears humanity. Not because humans are fearless, but because humans are so afraid of darkness that they burn themselves to ashes before they let it have the last word. And sometimes in a universe full of shadows and ancient horrors and regions where light goes to die, the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to turn off the lights. Marcus took a sip of premium coffee and smiled. All right, he said to his crew. Let's go find out what's wrong with Void Zone number 2. Rita checked her knives. Leo checked the compensator Mark II. Nina pulled up star charts with barely contained excitement. Humanity had found its calling in the cosmos, bringing light to darkness, making friends with monsters, and solving problems by being too stubborn to accept that some things should stay unknown. The dark had good reason to be afraid. Humans had arrived, and they'd brought flashlights.